What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2016 Volkswagen Mk6 Jetta GLI. Today on the Mk6 behind me, we're really covering how to do a complete suspension refresh, talking about dampers and springs, as well as our mounts. In front of us, we have one of the Bilstein kits available on fcpo.com, which is a cup kit, which includes the front and rear dampers, along with a set of H&R Sport springs, which will lower the whole car about 1.5 to 2 inches in total. Now, before you come at me in the comments, why isn't there a before and after? Let me start by saying that this car has been equipped with IBAC lowering springs since it was fairly new. It's at almost about 50,000 miles. So the factory dampers are starting to get a little bit tired, which is why we are doing a refresh today, along with a cup kit. So just keep that in mind. We'll try to show you before and after, but I would argue it's going to look kind of similar. Along on the table, we also have a 034 Motorsports strut kit, which includes everything you needed for the front dampers as far as strut mounting goes, the bearings, the plates, the hardware. To that, we have also added a Corteco shock mount kit. Now, with that being said, there's a couple items on the table that you may want to consider replacing, or some of you may want to reuse, depending on the age and condition of your vehicle. A lot of things like the bellows for the front or the rear, oftentimes the bump stops. Some of those can be in okay shape or good shape, depending on how long they've been on your car. So just keep that in mind. The kit makes it easy. You just click and add everything you need to the car if you want to do a full replacement, which we always recommend. So it's a lot of work to do all this just to put used old parts back in. Along with that, we also have spring shims in case the spring shims in the rear are worn out. And of course, all the hardware needed. Now, there's a couple debates on the interwebs, if you will, on how you can do this job, especially considering the front struts. The rear shock should be fairly easy on this car. Some people argue you can just undo the pinch bolt and kind of force everything down. You'll see others do the ball joint hardware as well to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room, and or the axle bolt. So we have all the hardware here to do everything as if we were going to pull everything off. Per Volkswagen, they recommend you undo the ball joints and the axle bolt as well to get the most leverage down to separate the knuckle from the strut body. We're going to try to do all of it as we go along, just to show you exactly what would happen if you were doing it at home. So maybe you don't want to do the axle bolt, what happens? Maybe you don't want to do the ball joint hardware, what happens? So we'll cover everything, and if we have to remove everything at the end, we will. All the hardware, kits, parts listed in front of us today are going to be in the description below. So if you want to do the same job at home, or if you're just doing factory dampers or maybe a factory spring replacement, this DIY will cover all of that. Again, Mk6 GLI today. However, the steps are going to be pretty similar for your base model Jettas as well. But before we get started on this, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, my good people, it may look like we have a lot of tools up here, but some of them are duplicates, some of them even triplets. The main things here that you're going to need as far as specialty sockets go are triple square bits. We have both an M6 and M14. However, you can sub the M6 for a 5mm hex. This is going to be for the sway bar end links. We have a T30. This is an extended one just to remove the fender liners in the rear. As far as sockets go, we have a 16, an 18, a 21. A specialty one here is going to be the 24 12-point for the axle bolts. To see a full list of every single tool here, be sure to pause the screen in just a moment where we'll give you every single tool that's up front here. But again, a lot of repetitiveness, large hammer, of course, pass-through sockets. I can't recommend this enough whenever you're doing any sort of suspension work or end link work. This is CTA 7466, comes in super handy. We're going to be diving into that as we go through this job. Small flathead, small pick tool. As far as wrenches go, we have a 10mm and an 18mm, the 18mm being crucial. You can probably sub the 10mm out for a socket. Electric tools make the job a little bit quicker. We have a bungee cord as well as a paint pen. Spring compressor, this is going to be crucial for doing the front strut assemblies. If you are not comfortable using one or you don't have a good one, the money you're saving doing this job yourself at home, following us along, take that money and use it at a shop. Have them disassemble and assemble your new struts for you. Be safe. It's the best thing I can recommend. Other things that you're going to need not pictured here is a floor jack and or a screw jack, depending on where you're working, whether lift, driveway, or the garage. But now with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. For the front section of the cup kit install, we're going to focus on the passenger side. However, the steps are going to be identical for both the driver and passenger. We're going to start by removing the beauty covers on our wheels. If your car is still equipped with those, now is the time to pop them off so we can access the 5 17mm lug bolts in the back. If you are not using a breaker bar to get your wheel off, make sure that you break the lug bolts free with the vehicle on the ground first. That way you don't put any weird strain on the driveline, and then you can lift it up and get the lug bolts the rest of the way off. So breaker bar, crack them free, and then lift up the car. For us today, we're just gonna zap them off using the impact gun. So it should make light work of them, but not everybody has one at home. 17 mil socket. Just be prepared for the last one to kind of grab the wheel so it doesn't fall on you and hurt you or damage the wheel. I'm just going to take this spacer off that this car is equipped with so it doesn't drop on us while we're working later on. But now that we have our wheel off, we have a much better view of where we're going to be working. Here's our factory Sachs damper up front, has the IBEX springs in it. These have almost 50,000 miles on them. They're a little bit tired. Before we work on removing any major hardware, we have a couple things to separate from the damper here. We have our speed sensor cable. We have the soft line that goes to our brake caliper. We also have a end link for the sway bar, which we're going to actually replace in a separate video, but the steps are kind of involved here. So for those of you looking for some torque specs, we'll cover that as well. So with that, let's get a little bit closer, work on detaching some of these things before we proceed to some of the bigger hardware. All right, for the speed sensor and the soft line, we can just undo this 10mm bolt that holds the bracket to the strut body. You can also undo this metal clip here and pop off the soft line that way, and pop the ABS cable off of the bracket. But either way, it needs to be transferred over. So we're just going to do the one-step thing and just get the 10mm bolt off using a ratcheting wrench. If you don't have a ratcheting wrench and you don't really want to have to turn it hand by hand with a regular wrench, then you can pop the line off here and sneak in a 10mm socket. All right. That's just going to give us some flexibility there, give us some room to work with. I'm just going to go ahead and thread the 10mm bolt right back in so I don't have to worry about misplacing it, and I know exactly where it goes when we're reassembling everything. With that situated, following up top here, we have our sway bar end link, which we're going to undo next. So for that, we're going to get our pass-through socket set, and we'll show you how to pull that off. For the end link, we have a 18mm nut and a M6 triple square counter hold. Now you may be able to get away with using a 5mm hex if you don't have the triple square. This 5mm hex out of our CTA pass-through socket set goes in decently. Now we have the M6 triple square that we need, so we're going to try the proper tool first, but if not, I'm sure you can make the 5mm hex work instead. We're just going to give this nut a chance to break free first. Okay, now that it's broken free, we don't want to spin the ball joint end, so we're going to go ahead and get our counter hold tool. Now, for those of you that don't have the pass-through socket set, you can obviously use a wrench and a counter hold tool instead of this pass-through socket. It might just be a little bit tighter, but if you do have to do that, I recommend using a ratcheting wrench just to speed things up a little bit. We're going to hang on to this nut. Again, we will be replacing these end links in a separate video, just covering those. So for those of you looking for that, make sure to keep an eye out. All right, now that that's free, we have our bracket free here. We have our end link free up top here. The next thing we can focus on, which is what we were covering at the beginning, is the pinch bolt. We can go ahead and remove this, separate or spread the knuckle, and see how far we can get this whole knuckle assembly to drop. If it can drop all the way and allow us to pull the strut body out of it, then that's fantastic. If we need to go further and undo the axle nut or the ball joint hardware underneath, we can also do that as well, which I have a feeling we may need to. But whether we cover them or not, we'll give you the torque specs if you need those as well. So with that, let's grab our socket and our counter hold on the back and get this pinch bolt out of the way. So on the back side of the bolt, we have an M14. So we have an M14 on our 1/2" drive ratchet. That's going to be our counter hold. And then on the other side, 18mm nut that we're going to zap off using the Milwaukee. So that's going to be our setup here. And we're going to go ahead and zap this out now. If you take a look at the shank on this bolt, you can see, even though this car has only 50,000 miles, and this was a part once to do the IBEX springs in it, it's pretty crusty, a little bit longer, and this would have been a lot harder to come out. So sometimes you need to spin the head of the bolt to free it up. hit everything with penetrating fluid of your favorite flavor to kind of help loosen everything up, which we did here before speeding the cameras again. But we are replacing these. VW recommends you replace them every time you take them off. So again, linked in the description below. Let's continue on. Now we're gonna grab our spreader tool and see how far we can drop this knuckle from the strut body. All right, now we're gonna take our spreader tool and put it in between here where the pinch bowl went to spread the knuckle, and then we're gonna see how far we can drop down this whole assembly. For those of you without the spreader tool, you can drive a chisel in there. Just careful not to overspread it and risk damaging the knuckle. So this tool, which we will link below as well, is designed specifically so that you don't kind of overpower everything. All right, so now we're spread. And now just giving it a few wiggles. It's dropping down a bit. All right, well, we came down a lot more than I would have anticipated. With this, I'm gonna grab the hammer, see if we can get 1 or 2 more maybe millimeters out of this, but I have a feeling we're gonna have to move on to plan B. So let me grab that first, which, if you didn't know, is my favorite tool. Now we're gonna work on removing the axle. Just keep in mind, these cars did come equipped with a couple different style axles. Bolts, these are the 12 point on this car. So we're gonna use a 24 mil 12 point. For those of you without an impact at home, you can break this bolt free. You would wanna put the wheel back on the car, get your socket through, and just break it free. No more than 90 degrees or you risk damaging the wheel bearing. Once you just give it that initial crack free, then you can lift it up, remove the wheel, and work it off the rest of the way. Something you can do is then take a flathead screwdriver. You don't want to damage the paint on your nice red calipers. Wrap them in a little bit of a towel or something similar. We're going to feed it through the veins of the disc. And then you can use that to jam everything up from spinning. And then you can take your breaker bar and remove it the rest of the way. I'll leave it in there just as insurance, but we're going to take the 24 12 point socket and just put it on the impact and zap it off. There we go. These can be a little bit tight to remove since they do have thread locker on them from the factory. What we're gonna do here though, is we're gonna go ahead and thread it back in a decent amount. I say a decent amount so we don't risk damaging any of the threads. Then we're gonna take our hammer and just give it a couple taps. And that's gonna help drive the axle out a bit, which is gonna allow us to drop this whole knuckle assembly down a little bit more, okay? If we need to go more, we can always switch over to a brass punch and use that to drive it through some more. But now we'll take our spreader tool and we'll try working this whole assembly down and see how much more we can get out of this knuckle. At this point, my good people, we have the axle bolt removed. We've put the separator tool in there. The strut body is nice and loose in the knuckle, but we're not really gonna get any more down pressure, which is usually the problem with doing these kind of strut jobs on these Mark 6s. So the last step of the puzzle, which is what we have the hardware for, is gonna be the 3 locking nuts underneath the ball joint. That's gonna allow us to separate it from the control arm and then be able to move this a bit freely. We're gonna keep the tie rod on, but that'll give us the room that we need to kind of maneuver everything, drop the spindle assembly down a little bit more, and get that strut body out. So with that, let's hop underneath for a hot second, get that hardware out, and go from there. All right, we have 3 16mm nuts to remove down here at the bottom. Now, you can always mark them to see what position they were in before you remove them. Whenever you do front end work like this, though, you always want to get in alignment afterwards anyway, so they'll have to mess with that adjustment. So we're not too worried about it for today, but should you be a little bit before you can bring it to the alignment shop, go ahead and mark them before you remove it. All right, with those freed up, now we can separate the ball joint from the control arm. There we go. You can already hear that knuckle assembly falling down, so let's get a little bit more eye level with this and work that off. Now we have our ball joint assembly undone. We have our axle bolt removed. We still have the spreader tool in the back going. Now we should be able to work this down a bit more. So we still have part of the axle shaft in the hub here. So we're gonna drive it back just a little bit more. wiggle that strut buddy out of the way. And now our goal here is just going to be to get everything back in place so that it's not dangling off of the tie rod. So easiest thing to do was just leave the shaft out, take one of the ball joint ends, feed it into the control arm. Everything can hang on there. From there you can do a bungee cord to the subframe just to kind of keep everything nice and taut so you have no weird pressure on your soft line or ABS cable or tie rod. All right, now that we have our bungee cord in place, we're going to go ahead and pop the hood open and work on the 3 bolts up top that hold the strut mount in place. That is holding our whole strut body assembly in here. As we undo those, we'll reach underneath and pull this out gently, and then we'll get ready to assemble our new Bilstein cup kit over at the table and feed it back in. Up top here, underneath the cowl, you can just lift it up gently. We have 3 13mm bolts to remove. Those go through the strut mount up top. So we're gonna work 2 off first, and then we'll leave the last one. We'll switch down to grab the body with one hand and undo the other one with the other. In this case, a second set of hands is super helpful, or an electric ratchet like this one. All right. And then we can go ahead and just gently pull it out. And here we go, my good people. Here's our old Mk6 unit. Again, this car was equipped with IBAC lowering springs. We're gonna go ahead and set this to the side. Now, because we are building a new strut body up top and we have the new mounts and everything, there's no need to really take this apart. If you weren't replacing the bellows and stuff like that, then you'd want to save them from this. We have a ton of videos on the channel doing strut work. We show you how to use the spring compressor, get these taken apart, put them back together. So if you're looking for that, be sure to check one of those out. For today, we're just going to build the new one. Should we need the spring compressor, we have it on standby. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We are over at the workbench. We're going to work on assembling our new strut assembly here. We're going to compress these springs so that we can get them to sit in far enough so that we can get our strut mount up. In this case, we are not reusing any of the old parts from the old strut assembly, so we're not taking it apart. We have our spring compressor here. We're going to get our spring in place and just start tightening it down. This is a part where I tell you, if you're not comfortable using one of these or you don't have a good tool, take the money that you're saving by doing this DIY yourself, go to a local shop, have them disassemble and assemble your new struts for you. That way you don't risk hurting yourself or damaging the vehicle, and then you can go on a cool test drive afterwards. All right, our spring is compressed. These strut assemblies, just like any strut assembly, typically they have a hard stop here that the bottom of the coil spring right here is going to butt up against. So that's going to be important once you go to tighten everything down and loosen up the spring compressor. While we have the spring compressor on, everything can kind of move around a bit. You're not going to hurt anything. But when it comes to loosening it all, you want to make sure that's nice and lined up. So that's going to look something like that for us. We have our washer in place that comes with the strut assembly. We have our 034 strut mount and bearing. The plastic side of the bearing goes up into the inside of the strut mount. They kind of sit and sandwich each other like so, metal plate facing down. These strut mounts also have arrows on them that point left and right. Those are going to point front and back on the vehicle when you go to install them. So just make sure that when you have the strut mount in place, those arrows are facing left and right. We'll color them in just so you can see them a little bit better. It's pretty hard to get these in the wrong way, but it doesn't hurt to cover it. Here are those arrows. And while we have this out, we're going to take our new bellow, or if you've taken your old one apart and you're reusing the bellows, the thinner end goes up, the wider end goes down. You'll notice these don't have a bump stop. The B8 units have an internal bump stop. These are inverted tubes, so there's no need to add one. That's why they have these nice beefy ends sticking out of them. But we're going to use the bellow just to protect everything from dirt and grime. These kind of clip into the inside of the metal bearing. There we go. So that way this will stay in the bearing and it won't dance around inside the car. These arrows we're going to facing the forward side of the strut body. Again, you can rotate it around once we tighten everything down, so not super critical, but when we go to install it back in the car, we want to make sure it's facing the right direction. All right, now we can take our new locking nut, just get that started by hand. All right, for this B8 unit, we have our counterhole tool. This is a 7mm hex. And we have our pass-through socket, which is a 22mm, again, using the CTA socket set. You can do this with a wrench and a 7mm hex per chance, but sometimes these top of the strut mounts are a little bit too deep and they won't allow you to get your wrench in all the way. So highly recommend this tool, especially if you're gonna be doing a lot of DIYs at home. Definitely a useful one. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start snugging down this 22mm up top, get our counter hold in all the way, make sure it's seated in nice and firmly. I'm gonna use the table to act as my counter holder. The torque spec for this 22mm per Bilstein is 72 Newton meters. So if you can get a torque wrench in here to torque that up that way, 72 Newton meters is your final spec. For us, we're just gonna snug it down really nicely using the ratchet. It's not a whole lot of torque. You can always go back to it once it's installed in the car if you wanna double check your work, but typically we get pretty good results. That's nice and tight. Now comes the important part, which is making sure that the bottom of the spring is sitting up against its stop on the bottom of the strut. So I'm gonna stand everything up, position everything properly. This is gonna be the front, so our strut top is in the direction it should be. As we lower the, as we release the spring, we'll make sure that the bearing goes into the strut top properly. So with that, we'll go ahead and undo this now. Just take your time with it. There's no rush. Especially if you're using a good tool, you should be able to just work nice and slowly and make sure everything lines up properly. That's the end goal here. There we go, my good people. That is our strut assembly assembled. You can see, it's a little bit hard to see, but the bottom of our spring is butted up against the perch there. We have our top strut mount, which again rotates as the car needs to be able to turn. So we'll just make sure that those two arrows are facing front and back. But now this baby's ready to install. So with that, let's head back to the car. We'll get our new 13mm bolts ready to rock, and we'll get those nice and snugged up so we can continue on. Now we're gonna go ahead and feed our new strut assembly in. We have our left and right arrow, again, facing front and back. That's gonna go in towards the inside of the strut tower, the singular end of the strut mount goes towards us. So we're gonna feed this in, get those 313 started by hand, and then we can work on tightening them down afterwards. We just wanna get them in there so that it can hold the whole strut assembly and keep it from falling down. And now we're gonna torque these down to 15 Newton meters plus an additional 90 degrees. With that, the top is situated. We can tuck this back down. And now we're good to rock and roll. With that, let's head back into the wheel well, marry the strut to the knuckle assembly, and button everything up. All right, my good people, it's time to pronounce these two in a shocking matrimony. We get our axle kind of back into place where we need it to go. Don't worry too much about the axle at this moment. We just want to get the strut body together with the knuckle. All right, with the knuckle joining the strut body a bit, we're gonna get our ball joint kind of situated back on the control arm. We're gonna get the 3 nuts on our ball joint just started so it doesn't pop back out. Now, this one can be a little bit of a wrestle, but it's definitely doable. Obviously, having a second set of hands never hurts whenever you're doing this kind of job. All right, my good people, at this point, we're gonna grab our screw jack, or if you're following along in the driveway or the garage, your floor jack. We're gonna raise this whole knuckle assembly up the strut body. Just like the old damper that we took out, there is a fin on the back that you have to use to key into the back of the knuckle. You'll see our tool is gonna be in a little bit of the way. We're gonna go as far as we can go with the tool in place, then we'll reposition the tool once the fin starts dropping in. We have our screw jack. We're just gonna raise up this whole knuckle assembly. On these Bilsteins, we're gonna make sure that the fin keys itself onto the back where our spreader tool is, and there is a soft line here, which is kind of a bit of a stepped lip that will allow the knuckle to stop once it's all the way up, along with the welds on either side of the fin. They're pretty on par with each other. Okay, let's reposition our spreader tool. Get that out of the way. At this point, the strut assembly is all the way in. You can see the bottom of the assembly butting up with the little lip on the inside of the knuckle. At this point, we can remove our pinch tool and get our pinch bolt in and snug down, and then we'll torque it to spec. That way we can remove the screw jack and then work a little bit freely, getting the ball joint situated and all that good stuff. I'm gonna use a little bit of the ceramic paste on the part of the bolt that doesn't get the locking nut so that it doesn't rust up as badly as the one that was in here did. That way in the future, when this guard gets pulled apart again, it's a little bit easier to come out, and hopefully this bolt isn't rusty. So again, we're not doing the threaded portion, we're just doing the portion that sits on the inside of the knuckle and the strut. We're gonna take our pinch tool out, feed our triple square bolt from the back. All right, now we're gonna get our 18 on, and then we'll grab our same triple square setup on the ratchet with our 18mm socket, and we'll just snug these down and then we'll torque it down properly. All right, we have our triple square. This is gonna be our M14 on our 1/2" drive ratchet. That just happens to be the size socket we have. That'll be counter holding. We're gonna snug up the 18 using the impact first, and then we'll torque it down with the torque wrench. All right, that's making contact. Now we're gonna switch over to our torque wrench. We're gonna set it to 70 Newton meters, followed by an additional 90 degrees. All right, my good people, with that, now we can lose the screw jack and we can work on tightening up the 3 16mm nuts down for the ball joint. So let's go ahead and do that now. These 3 16mm nuts get torqued down to 40 Newton meters plus an additional 45 degrees. So we'll do the 40 on all 3 first. Now that that's situated, let's get a little bit more eye level with everything. We're gonna work on reinstalling our fresh axle bolt. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, my good people, next on our laundry list is the axle bolt. There's 2 types of 12 points for these cars. You'll either have the 12 point without ribs, meaning there is no ribbed surface on the back of the large washer. Those get torqued down to 200 Newton meters plus 180 degrees, which is what this car is gonna get today. If your vehicle has the ribbed 12 point bolt, then you're gonna torque those to 70 Newton meters plus an additional 90 degrees. So just keep that in mind before you zap them in, and always replace them. They are one-time use. Make sure your new one has the thread locker on it, ready to rock and roll. We're gonna go ahead and feed this one in. Now we have it in by hand a few threads. We're gonna go ahead and just snug it up using the electric impact. We're not gonna tighten it, we're just snugging it up. 24 mil 12 point. Now we're gonna do a couple things. We're gonna take our flathead screwdriver once more, and similar to how we were advising using it to remove it, especially if you don't have an impact, we're gonna use it to help us tighten everything down. So feeding it through the center of the brake caliper once more. Paper towel here is just to keep us from damaging the paint on the caliper. I'm gonna load it up. And then as insurance, I always like to thread in 1 lug bolt as well, just to keep the hub from spinning on the disc, since we're locking the disc in as well. You don't want to shear off your rotor set screw and then you have a bigger problem. All right, now with that, we're gonna go ahead and do the initial 200 Newton meter torque on the bolt. I'm gonna raise up the car just to give myself better leverage. For those of you working at home, lower the car down as much as you can, just so you have more pushing leverage, and then we'll go from there. All right, so with our non-ribbed bolt, we're going for the 200 Newton meters first. All right, then again, it gets an additional 180 degrees. If you have the ribbed bolt, it's 70 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. So all I did was make a paint mark. That way I know where my bolt is now. And then I'm gonna switch over, just because we're dealing with higher Newton meters here, to a regular breaker bar and give that a 180 degree mark. And then we'll go ahead and hit it with the paint pen. All right, we have our 180. We're just gonna hit it with a paint mark on the front here, just so that we remember that it's all good to go. Now we can get eye level with the car again, work on our end link, and go from there. We go ahead and feed this baby through. Give a little push on the sway bar if you need to. Get our nut fed back on. Now we're gonna grab our pass-through socket set with our 18 mil socket, and we'll grab our M6 triple square. We're gonna snug it up, and then we're gonna torque everything down to 65 Newton meters. So you can see, it's not a whole lot. You literally just snug it up. Then we'll take our paint pen and mark it down. Almost matches the Bilstein blue. All right, with our end link situated, the last thing left on our laundry list up here is to get our bracket back on that holds the ABS cable and the soft line. So let's button that up. And we're just gonna snug this up gently. If you're gonna torque it down, no more than 9 Newton meters, but this just needs to be snugged up gently. And there we go. At this point, our strut body is in, our end link is in, our bracket's back on, pinch bolt is situated, ball joints are situated from underneath. All we really have left to do here is put our wheel back on. From there, we're gonna just hop over to the back side and pick it up with installing, well, removing the old hardware and springs and installing our new B8s and sport springs from H&R. So stick around, let's continue on. All right, my good people, starting over in the back of the Jetta, we're gonna work on doing the dirty work first, which is gonna be removing the fender liner. I believe there's 9 T30s holding this in. Now, could you probably get this rear shock mount out without undoing this and just folding it out of the way? Sure. We're here to show you though how to do this job at home, so we need to give you the best view possible. And it's never a bad idea to inspect the inside of the wheel wells every now and then, clean out the fender liner properly, all that good stuff. So let's get our T30. We're just gonna zap them all out. We'll pull it out and then we'll pick it up underneath the car. For now, we're gonna leave that, but the top of our shock mount is located right up here, which is why we removed this wheel liner in the first place. So before we get to that, we're gonna go ahead and get underneath the car and make sure we can get the lower control arm undone and the lower shock bolt undone so that we can get this old spring out. We'll check out the spring purchase, and if we need to, we'll replace them with the ones on the table, and then we'll take the rest of the shock body out. So let's get to it. All right, with the car up in the air for us, for those of you at home in the garage or driveway, up on your jack stands, now would be the time to set the floor jack or screw jack underneath the lower control arm. We're gonna undo the 18mm bolt, counter holding the 18mm nut on the other side with a wrench. That way the spring doesn't shoot everything down at us. So 18 on the impact, 18 in my hand on the other side. We're gonna counter hold that baby, zap this one out. We're gonna be replacing this hardware, also linked in the description below. With that undone, we're gonna slowly lower this screw jack. At this point, we can go ahead and pull our arm down a bit and get this old spring out of place. Here's our upper spring perch, and our lower one is still in the arm. We're gonna go ahead and replace these since we have fresh ones. And this job probably won't be done for another 50 to 100,000 miles. So we'll go ahead and set these to the side for now. We're gonna keep the spring perches where they go so we don't mix them up. They are just a little bit different. Let's work on that bottom one. From the bottom here, there is a plastic grommet that goes through the spring perch. We're gonna go ahead and try to pop that through using a flathead screwdriver. Just prying it a little bit, loosening it up. Sometimes these can get bound up with how much dirt they see. Here's the bottom spring perch. These two have a little dowel that key them into the control arm. And holding it down the center is this little plastic piece right here. This is what was protruding through, keeping the spring perch in place. And to feed the new spring perch in, while I have you here, little dowel out the back, no problem. And then if we can, we'll feed this plastic clip through. Kind of just helps hold it in place. There we go. For the top one, we're gonna give that a little bit of a wipe as well, get some of this road grime off. Okay, that's all right. This is not a show car. It's better than how it was when we started. This one's gonna go up here, which we'll hang on to until we put the new spring in. But now this gives us plenty of access to the 21mm bolt that holds the bottom of our shock in place. So we're gonna go ahead and get that one out next. Same thing for this bolt. We have a new one. They're all linked in the description below. We are gonna be replacing them. So with that one out, now we can work on the top two bolts that hold in the top of the shock mount. So let's go ahead and get the screw jack out of the way, get a little bit more eye level with it, and get that one out. Holding the top of the shock, we have two 16mm bolts. Let's go ahead and zap those out. And here is our old shock assembly. We're gonna go ahead and take this over to the workbench and we're gonna recreate our new one, just looking at this one. So let's go ahead and do that now. This one might come back in 5 to 7 business days. It's pretty well toast. See if we can pull it up. Do it again. No problem. All right, my beautiful people, we have our new shock assembly. Is it an assembly if it's singular? We have our new shock. We're gonna go ahead and take the locking nut that comes off of it. We're gonna go ahead and take our new mount. We're gonna take our bump stop and we're gonna take our bellow. We're gonna go ahead and join them together. There is a ring on the bump stop that helps lock into the bellow. So we're gonna go ahead and kind of get that in. You really just have to give it a good twist and just kind of force one lip at a time. There's a little opening on said bellows, almost like when you use a tire machine, that will allow you to spin it and get the whole thing in. With that situated, we're gonna take our shock mount and just press the bump stop into it. And now that's gonna sit like that forever. We're gonna take that, feed it over our shock body. Beautiful. Now we can take our new locking nut, get that started by hand. We're gonna grab our pass-through socket set, snug that up. Torque spec for these are 25 Newton meters. It's not a whole lot. So once you have it nice and snugged up, you're gonna be good to go. We have our 17mm socket and we have our pass-through bit. This is gonna be a 5mm hex bit. And that's what we're gonna use to snug this baby up. Make sure that your hex bit is all the way in. The last thing you want it to do is snap off in the top of the shock body or break or strip, and you're gonna have a bad time. So just periodically make sure that's in there all the way. I'm using the table as my counter holder. All right, that's nice and snug. And now we have a new shock assembly ready to go back in the car. Last but not least, don't forget your little dust cap. These you can probably recover and reuse, but they are available, they are inexpensive, and usually included if you go with the Corteco shock mount kit, like the one we have today. Now with that, let's head over to the car. We have our new hardware for the top shock mount, our new hardware for the bottom control arm, as well as the bottom shock, and our spring. We're gonna install that obviously with the lettering facing upright. Let's head over to the car and do it. All right, now we're gonna feed in our new shock assembly. I'm gonna go and feed this baby up through here, line it up, get our two 16mm bolts started by hand first. Again, these are one-time use bolts as they are torque to yield, so please be sure to replace them. But again, they're included with the Corteco kit, so make your life easy and just freaking get the kit, man. Now they're snugged up. We're gonna take our torque wrench and set it to 50 Newton meters. And then we have to do an additional 45 degrees. And we're gonna go ahead and feed a new 21mm bolt end, pulling down on the trailing arm a little bit just to get that bolt lined up. Make sure you start it by hand first. All right, now we have it in a bit. We're just gonna snug it up using the impact, and then we're gonna torque it down. This 21 gets torqued down to 130 Newton meters, plus an additional 90 degrees, which is why we recommend replacing them. Okay. All right, with that torque to 130, we're gonna make a mark We're gonna go ahead and torque this bolt down an additional 90 degrees per VW, and then we'll be good to rock and roll. Beautiful. Now with that, we can get our spring. So just like the fronts, you want the lettering to be legible, right side up. We're gonna put our top perch on the top of the spring there. Pull the arm down. Get the bottom of the spring situated on the lower perch. And get that one up there just like so. Pretty straightforward. Now we're gonna take our screw jack and or floor jack and use that to raise up the arm and get that in line with the trailing arm so we can get our new hardware in. Okay, we're gonna use a small flathead screwdriver, same one we used up front, just to help line up the bolt hole. I'm just doing the same thing but from the back side. Here we go. Give it a little love tap. Before we send it all the way through, we wanna make sure that the hole on the back of the arm is lined up. Then we're gonna get our nut in place as it's a tight fit so that we can get that one started by hand, and then we'll tighten it down. Gonna give this bolt a little tap through. All right, get that nut lined up. All right, with that nut there, we're gonna go ahead and just raise up the car a bit more, almost to simulate ride height. And now with that, we're gonna just take the 18 on the impact. We're gonna take our 18mm wrench, and we're just gonna snug it up before we torque it down properly. Now we're gonna set our torque wrench down to 70 Newton meters, and then we're gonna do an additional 180 degrees right after that. All right, my good people, at this point we have the shock in, the top mount is situated, the bottom mount is situated, or the bottom shock bolt. We have our spring in place, our lower control arm is in, everything's buttoned up. All we really have left to do is put in our wheel liner. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, fender liner is going in. Make sure that your drain for the fuel fill still tucks behind it. You don't want to block it or anything like that. Okay, we're just gonna get some of the T30 started by hand. All right, and now we're just gonna go around and snug all of them up. Now we're gonna go ahead and throw our wheel back on. Now we're just gonna snug them up in a gentle crisscross pattern. With the wheels snugged up in a crisscross pattern, now we can lower the car down and give them the final torque. We'll do the same with the fronts, and we'll button up this DIY for today. With the car on the ground, we're gonna torque the lug bolts to 120 Newton meters in a crisscross pattern. And if you have them, don't forget to put your little dust covers back on. And with that, my good people, that is going to conclude this cup kit install for today. Overall, a pretty straightforward job on the Mk6 Jetta. Again, pretty similar for your base models as well. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, or you want to see a specific DIY, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this video and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.